Alright guys, I wanted to make this video to show you guys how you can use Blue Yeti microphone and make it sound pretty good without having to run it through any external programs, without having to use voice meter or anything else other than OBS. There's a lot of tutorials on YouTube about how to make your Blue Yeti sound better, and some of them are old, most of them have you use third-party software, and if that works for some people, that's fine, but I just prefer to do everything inside OBS, and there is ways to make it sound good. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you need to know about the Blue Yeti is it's a super sensitive microphone. So you want to make sure that you have it on the right settings, both on the microphone itself and also inside Windows before we even get started in OBS. Okay, so on the back of the microphone, there's two settings that are really important here. They are gain and essentially recording modes. So the first thing on gain, set that as low as it'll go. All gain is going to do, if you turn it up, is going to introduce more noise into your recording that's going to sound like crap. So turn that all the way down so that there's no gain. So the second setting that's back there is just recording modes, and this is for different type of recording environments. But there's one setting in particular that we want to use. So if you look here on the Blue Yeti user manual, the one we're looking for is called cardioid, this one right here. And it's got the picture, it looks like a heart. And what that does, you see this little picture here, is it essentially, from a 45-degree angle on both sides of the front of the microphone out in a cone, is the only thing the audio is going to pick up. So it's not going to be as loud to picking up anything that happens behind the microphone or directly to the side of the microphone. And that's what you want to use for podcasts and streaming in particular. So now that we've set our gain to 0 on the Blue Yeti microphone, we've set the recording mode to cardioid. The one last thing we need to do with inside Windows before we get to OBS is we want to turn down the microphone input level. Again, like I said, the Blue Yeti is really sensitive, and so we're actually bringing everything down a little bit so that it doesn't pick up all the noise that it can possibly pick up. So the way you do that is you're just going to find your little volume icon down here. And if you right click on it in your taskbar, you can just click recording devices. And you're going to see the Blue Yeti. So if you double click on that, go to the levels tab. And you can set this anywhere from 80 to 90, 99. Don't leave it at 100. You can play around with it, but I use 70, and 70 seems to work really, really well for me. Okay, so before we get started in OBS, there's two things we need to download. One of them is what's called a VST plugin set. And so these are going to be the plugins that we actually use inside OBS to make the changes that we need to make our microphone sound better. The other one is a piece of software called Reaper. Now, I know what you're thinking. You said we weren't going to use any external software. We're not going to use it once we're done, but we use it to find the settings that we need to get our voice sounding good. It's just a lot better. I'll explain it later. You'll see what I mean. And once we're done getting our settings, we can toss that program. We can uninstall it. We won't need it. Okay, so the first piece of software we're going to get is called Reaper, and it's an audio recording software. It's not free, but you can use the trial version, and that's all we need it for anyways. So what you want to do is make sure you get the 64-bit version, because I'm assuming you're all using 64-bit operating systems, and if you're not, you should be. So go ahead and download that, install it. And the second one is going to be the VST plugin suite, and I'll have links for both of these down in the description. And what you want to do is you want to grab the 64-bit version of the plugins, and it comes with an installer, so just go ahead and let it install, and then when you restart your OBS, they should be there to use. So now we're going to start using the filters to adjust how our voice sounds on microphone. Now, there's 3 filters that I recommend everyone use. The first one is what's called a noise gate. So what does a noise gate do? So a noise gate, what you do is you set the level, the decibel level or the volume level for when the microphone becomes active and starts transmitting sound. What that means is small background noises, maybe you got a dog running around or a fan in the background, keyboard clicks, mouse clicks, if you've got a mechanical keyboard like me. You don't want your mic coming on unnecessarily and transmitting that if you're not actually talking. So what this does is we're going to set the level so that the microphone only transmits when my voice starts talking because it hits the decibel level. and then it stops transmitting afterwards. And that's essentially what a noise gate does. So if we click on the little gear here next to microphone, we can choose filters. And then down in the bottom left-hand corner, you want to hit the plus sign. Now, these four, compressor, gain, noise gate, and noise suppression, these are OBS's built-in filters. They do a pretty good job, but I prefer to use the VST plugins that we just grabbed from the Reaper website. That gives you a little bit more control, and we're going to use them for the other two filters anyways. So what you're going to want to do is click on this VST 2.x plugin, and you want to give it a name. So I'll give it the name Noise Gate. Go ahead and hit OK. Now what you're presented with is this little screen here that says select a plugin, and then open plugin interface or open interface when active. So we're going to hit this little drop down menu here that says select a plugin. And here's where you should see the list of Reaper VST plugins that we downloaded. If you don't see this list, then your installation of when you install the VST plugins, something went wrong. You maybe don't have OBS installed into the default directory. And so you'll just need to go through the OBS support forums and you'll find where exactly you need to install those. But if your OBS was installed to the default directory and you ran the installer that came with the VST plugins, they should all show up. So the one we're looking for is called RIA Gate-Standalone. So you click on that and right away nothing happens. So what we need to do is we need to open the plugin interface. And when we do that, it's going to give us the screen that we need to make our changes that are going to gate our voice out. So there's a lot of settings here. There's only a few that we need to use. It's not that confusing. So the first one on the left-hand side, you'll see as I talk, this green bar jumping up and down. Let me just move that up so you can see it. This green bar jumping up and down. So what this is when you're talking at a normal voice, this is the decibel level that you're talking at. So this thing here on the left, as you drag this up, this is going to decide what the gate is. So let's say I put it way up here. As you can see, over here, it's not transmitting anything. And that's because I've set the gate much higher than the sound that I'm actually speaking at. So what you want to do here is you want to stay relatively quiet, but typically the environment noise that you're going to have when you're going to be streaming. And what I suggest is tap on your keyboard, click on your mouse, hit your space button. If you're playing FPSs or any game that requires hitting your space bar is typically the loudest button on your keyboard. So what you do is stay quiet, and I'll just hit some keys here so you can hear it. So you can see it's jumping up a little bit. So turn this down, bring this all the way down. And what you want to do is bring it down until when you hit your keyboard, you don't see transmission over here on the right-hand side, but as soon as you start talking, you do see it. So right about there is good for me. Now this takes a little bit of tweaking, and we'll go over how we can test all our settings afterwards. So once you get it set to where you think, okay, this is a good spot, there's a couple settings up here that you don't have to change, but you can make changes. And the two that I suggest that maybe you look at if you're having issues is attack and hold. So what attack does is that is in milliseconds how fast after it detects the volume reaching the level that the microphone opens. So if you notice that the beginning of your sentences are getting cut off, it's either two things. It's either your noise gate is a little too high, or you can turn this attack down. I put it at 1 millisecond. There's no reason for me to want to have it wait until it opens. The second one is hold. And what this does is in milliseconds again, it determines how long the microphone stays open after it's reached below the level. So the microphone sound comes below the level we've set, and then it holds it open for how many ever milliseconds. I normally use about 200 milliseconds here, and that's just to prevent if I'm taking a breath or, if in between sentences, it doesn't cut out and cut back in again, because that can sound a little jarring. So once we have that set, That's it. That's all we need to do. We're done. We're good. So we can go ahead and close that down. So now we're going to work on the second plugin, and this is the one that makes all the difference in the world. This one's called the Equalizer, and this is where we really go in and fine tweak our voice to make it sound as good as we can. So this is where we're going to use Reaper. We're not going to use OBS for this until after, and I'll explain why. So let's go ahead and open Reaper. So when you're using the trial version, when Reaper comes up, this will come up, and if you just wait, there's a little countdown timer here. If you just go ahead and wait until it's done, you can click Still Evaluating. Okay, so now the couple things you need to do here. First thing you want to do is go in your options, hit Preferences, and then come down to Audio Device. So under Audio and Device, you want to make sure that your input device is set as your microphone, and your output device is set as wherever you want it to come out of when you start playing it, or if you've got mic monitoring on. So that could be your speakers. In this case, I have it set to my headphones. Just as long as your input device is your microphone, your output device is where you want to listen it to, you're good. So go ahead and hit OK. So now we've done that. We've made sure that that's okay. There's a couple settings across here that you need to worry about. So if I have this little recording arm button off, then it's not going to record. Nothing's going to happen. As you can see, I have no inputs going on here. Let me just move my overlay so that you guys can see this. So you can see that there's nothing going on. Okay, so when we click that, that turns on what's called record arm. So it's armed and ready to be recorded. The other one that you want to do is this little speaker button here. This is record monitoring on. So what you'll notice if this is on is as you're talking, it's either coming out of your speakers or it's coming out of your headphones, wherever we've set that output device. And that can be a little jarring and confusing, especially when we're recording. So you can go ahead and turn that off. We don't need that on. So when you click that a couple times, it turns it off. And so what we're going to do, the purpose of this is we're going to record ourselves reading a paragraph or talking like we would talk inside OBS and when we're streaming. And then we're going to use the same plugins that we're going to use in OBS to adjust our voice while it's looping. And it's just a faster way to really dial in our settings for how we want to do that. So let's get started. So let's just read a paragraph. So I'm just going to pull up some news here, and I'm just going to read a paragraph from a local news story. I'm in Canada, and right now it's freezing here. So let me just read this quickly. And so what you want to do is right down here, this red circle, you're going to want to click this, and then we're going to start recording. Okay, so here we go. The bone-chilling cold settled over Toronto, smashed a nearly 57-year-old temperature record, Environment Canada said Thursday. And while a slight warming may be coming, it will be cold well into the year. So once you're done, you just go ahead and you click that record button again, and you see you've got yourselves a nice recording track. Now, I'd like to do a couple things first. I like to bring in the ends and bring in the beginning, just because we're going to loop this and we don't want any dead sound. It just delays what we're trying to do. And then if you click and drag on the track, you can bring it right back to the beginning. Okay, so up here, you're going to see the FX button. Now, yours might be off. This little button here, it might be red if you hit it and it's green. So if you hit beside the FX, the power button in the actual word FX, it's going to bring up your FX panel. And just give me a sec. I'm going to remove mine so you guys can see what it looks like when you first pop it up. Okay, so this is what it looks like. FX track 1. So we are going to add in an FX track, and now there's a bit more here, but you'll see that these are exactly the same as the ones that we've installed in OBS. So what we're going to look for in this one is RIA EQ, this one right here, and that stands for Equalizer. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And now we've got this little interface, and we can drag that to make it a little bit bigger. So this is where we're going to make our voice sound better. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is you want to hit this little button down here, and what that's going to do, it's going to toggle the repeat on. So basically, it's just going to keep repeating what we recorded over and over and over again, and while it's doing that, we're going to use these settings here to dial in changes to our voice. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that, and now if I go ahead and hit play, I'll drag this back to the beginning. If I go ahead and hit play, you're going to hear what I recorded, and it's just going to loop. The bone-chilling cold settled over Toronto, smashed a nearly 57-year-old temperature record, Environment Canada said Thursday. And while a slight warming may be coming, it will be cold well into the bone-chilling cold settled over Toronto. And so when you want to stop that, just go ahead and hit pause. So you can see it's just going to loop and loop and loop. And as you saw when we were playing it, there were some things happening over here. And that's basically, it's showing you the frequencies of your voice. So what you want to do here is these 4 settings, particularly 2 and 3, are where you're going to dial in your voice. So for the first one, what I recommend you do is you're just going to make sure 1 is selected, or the tab here, 1 is selected. You're going to come down here to type and just choose high pass. And what that's going to do is it's basically going to cut off any frequency that drops below here. Those frequencies are not pleasant frequencies. They're low hums or rumbles of vehicles going by. We don't want them in our voice. We don't need them. So you can just go ahead and chop that right off. So once you've done that, what you can do is you can click the 2 over here and make sure so it shows that this is selected. And what we're going to do is I'm going to play this back, and you're going to see I'm just going to use extremes. I'm going to drag it all the way up to the top and all the way up to the bottom as I'm playing back my voice, and we're going to see how it changes my voice. Smashed a nearly 57-year-old temperature record, Environment Canada said Thursday. And while a slight warming may be coming, it will be cold well into the bone-chilling cold settled over Toronto, smashed a nearly 57-year-old temperature record, Environment Canada said. Okay, so you can see that as I pulled it up and down, it did different things to my voice. Now, this is where it's really important that everyone's voice is different. So this is going to be different for each and every one of you, and it's going to depend on what you think sounds the best. So depending on how deep or how high pitched your voice is, how nasally it is, you're going to make different settings to 2 and to 3. And if we bring 2 back down to the middle, I'll show you what 3 does. Said Thursday. And while a slight warming may be coming, it will be cold well into the bone-chilling cold settled over Toronto, smashed a nearly 57-year-old temperature record, Environment Canada said Thursday. And so you can see 2 adds a little bit of a more bassy, deeper sound to your voice, and 3 kind of changes the nasaliness of your voice. And so what you want to do with those 2 is dial them both in to a point where you're happy. So for me, I like to add a little bit more bass to my voice because my voice is a little bit more nasally. So I'll take this and I'll drag the gain button up. You don't want to go too extreme on this. I know at the first, if you're like me and you have a bit more of a nasally voice, you might jack it up and think, oh yes, finally I have my deep voice. And eventually what happens is it just becomes really muddy and it's not clear and it doesn't sound good. So you want to do this in smaller increments, and subtlety is what makes the difference here. So I'll bring it up to about 4.8, and let's play that and see how that sounds. While a slight warming may be coming, it will be cold well into the bone-chilling cold settled over Toronto. Okay, so that sounds not too bad. So now we're going to go to 3, and we're going to do the same thing, and we're just going to bring the nasaliness out of it. Smashed a nearly 57-year-old temperature record, Environment Canada said Thursday. And while a slight warming may be coming, it will be cold well into the bone-chilling cold. Okay, so right away we see that sounding a lot better. So once we have those 2 dialed in, and like I said, it's going to be different depending on the voice, you can go over to band number 4, and you can just play with that one. To be honest with you, I'm not sure what this one does to your voice, but you can bring it up and down to see how it's going to impact it as it's playing back. Cold settled over Toronto, smashed a nearly 57-year-old temperature record, Environment Canada said Thursday. And while a slight warming may be coming, it will be cold well into the bone-chilling. So that's about where I like to have it. So once you've dialed this in and you've got your voice sounding really good on the loop, what we're going to do here is, this is a lot easier if you have 2 monitors. If not, you're just going to want to write this down. So you're going to come to each number, each tab, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and either have it up at the same time as your OBS or write them down. And what you're going to want to write down is the type, which is high pass for this one, the frequency, the gain, and the bandwidth. And for each and every one of these tabs, you're going to do the same thing. So the type, 2, 3, and 4, or 2 and 3, sorry, should be band, 4 should be high shelf. And so then you're just going to write down the type, and again, the frequency, the gain, the bandwidth. Don't worry about this note thing here. You can't change that, and it's different. It seems to be off a little bit in OBS or a little different, but it doesn't matter. So once you've written those down, you're going to want to come back into OBS. Okay, so now we're back in OBS, and we're going to add another filter. And again, we're going to hit the plus sign. We're going to choose VST 2.x plugin again, but this time we're going to call it Equalizer, or EQ. So process is the same. We're going to hit the drop-down menu, but this time we're going to look for RIA EQ Standalone. And this is going to be the exact same plugin that we just used on the Reaper software. And so if you go ahead and hit Open Plugin Interface, and look at that. It's the same plugin with the same controls. And so now you're going to understand why we did what we did in Reaper. So you can come in and dial these in exactly the way that you dialed in the settings on Reaper. So you can either watch, if you have two monitors, you can leave Reaper open on one and use OBS on the other. If you wrote it down, then you can just go ahead and dial these in. And what this is going to do is exactly what it did in Reaper. It is going to adjust our voice to make it sound as good as it can. So I'll just do this quickly. Drop this down. And then we'll bring 4 all the way back up. Okay, so there you go. And our equalizer is now done and active. We can go ahead and close this off. Now, as long as the eye is filled in here, these are both going to be active. If the eye is off, these are not going to be active. So we want them on. That makes them active. The order in which you do these filters matters as well. Noise gate first, so it's the equalizer is not going to affect anything except after the noise gate. So keep that in mind, that the stack order of your filters determines what it does first. So it does it in a sequential order of the list. So the last filter we're going to use is called a compressor. And what a compressor does is it takes very loud noises and it compresses them so they don't transmit as loud. So as an example, if you're playing on stream and all of a sudden you yell, instead of it blasting the speakers of the people that are listening to you, it's going to compress that loud noise and make it transmit a little bit lower so that it tries to keep everything at an even keel. And this is really good when you're streaming or recording voiceovers for YouTube, because you don't want your audio peaking up and down. There's nothing worse than listening to somebody and you've got your volume set to a good level, and then all of a sudden they start talking louder and you've blasted your eardrums, or everyone else in the room is asking you to turn your stuff down. So same process here, guys. We're going to hit the plus sign in the bottom left-hand corner. We're going to choose VST 2.x plugin. This time we're going to call it Compressor. So now that we have that in, we're going to hit the drop-down menu. And this time we're going to look for RIA Comp right here, the first one on the list. Go ahead and select that and then hit Plugin Interface. And this looks a lot like the Noise Gate plugin interface with a couple little differences. So this time what we're going to want to do is you want to have a look at this where you're talking and where it's peaking out at. And what you want to do is you want to kind of yell a little bit. So as you yell, if you'll see, if I bring this way down, everything. So if I bring it down here, now it's compressing any volume that goes here. It's going to compress it. The other setting you need to change is what's called your ratio. And what your ratio does is that is how much it compresses the volume in multiples of itself, right? So for instance, if I scream into the microphone and it goes above my set level, and if I have my ratio set to 4-1, or let's say 4-1, so you can see that anything above that level is now being compressed at a ratio of 4-1. So it's compressing it down 4 times the actual sound. So what you see right away now is you've got 2 bars dancing. You've got this bar right here on your right-hand side. That's your input volume bars, or input reader. It's showing you how loud you're talking. And then the other bar, this red bar, that is showing you how much you're compressing your voice. So what you want to do is you want to start to yell. And then when you're yelling, you want to change this bar on the left-hand side so that soon as you don't want it to do it to all of your talking voices. You only want to do it to your loud voices. And when you start talking loud, you want to see it compress it a little bit. So, you can, I normally go with a 4.0 ratio, which is pretty heavy, but I don't like to blast people's ears out. So I leave mine at 4.0. And then I'll start talking loud, and then I'll see, okay, is it gonna blast it out? And you can play with this a little bit. I'm not gonna yell into the microphone right now and blast everyone's ears to show you how I would set mine. But that's what you do. You just talk really loud, and you keep dragging this up until you get to a point where, okay, my normal talking voice isn't being compressed because I'm not seeing any red bar here. But when I yell, it's being compressed. So that's what you're gonna want to do here. Once you get that done, you can leave all the other settings default, and then you can just go ahead and close that, and we're done. And so now you should have a voice that sounds a lot better than the default Blue Yeti just plugging it into your computer. A couple things to note here. It's good to do some local recordings of you playing some games and talking into the microphone to see how it sounds. Sometimes your voice can sound really good, and then all of a sudden you start to play a game, and what you realize is the frequencies that you dialed in the equalizer to are kind of muddling with the sounds of your computer, and so your voice isn't as clear. And so you might have to bring some of your settings up or down a little bit and just tweak them a little bit. Same with the noise gate. If you're playing a game or you're recording a game and you're talking like you would talk on stream, but you're noticing that it's cutting off a lot of your words or your sentences, then your noise gate is a little too high, and you want to bring it down, a little too low, and you want to bring it up a little bit so that it transmits your volume at a lower rate. And that's basically it. Those are the 3 settings that you want to use. There's one other setting that a lot of people will suggest you want to use, and I don't. And there's a reason for that. And that is noise suppression. And what noise suppression does is it suppresses the background noise, fans, computer fans, and it does do a really good job. The problem is it affects the sound quality of your voice. If your noise is so high, like if that noise suppression is set to a level that's a little bit too high, all of a sudden your voice starts to sound really tinny. Sounds like you're speaking in a tin can, and you can spend hours messing with your equalizer, and you just won't get it to sound good. And I've went through hours and hours of this, and eventually what I came to the conclusion of was that noise suppression, it doesn't go well with an equalizer. So I just cut it out of my process altogether, and my life was a lot easier because of it. So keep that in mind. If you watch another tutorial and they tell you to use a suppressor, and you go ahead and you use the noise suppression, and then all of a sudden your voice is sounding tinny, that's why. It's because of the noise suppression. So I don't recommend using it, but again, it's up to you guys to make your own decisions. But I hope this video helped you guys. I hope you're able to make your Blue Yeti sound a little bit better, and this tutorial is a little bit more up to date and doesn't use third-party software. Now, this process, obviously, this applies to all kinds of microphones, not just the Blue Yeti. The only thing that might be different is at the beginning our settings that we changed for the Windows sound and the gain and the cardioid settings on your microphone, depending on whether or not you have them or not. But the filters themselves will work with any microphone. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, shoot me a comment below. And if there's any other tutorials that you would like to see done, let me know, and I might be able to help you out. All right, guys, take it easy.